Welcome, everyone, to the 26th annual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of social and environmental justice. My name is Astoria Ridley, and I am a law librarian for the state of Connecticut Judicial Branch Law Libraries, and I'm also a member of the executive board for the Black Caucus of the American Library Association, BCALA, Connecticut affiliate. The Black Caucus of American Library Association is a national organization for Black librarians who are celebrating their 50th anniversary. Our Connecticut affiliate has been active since 1999. BCALA serves as an advocate for the development, promotion, and improvement of library services and resources to the nation's African American community and provides leadership for the recruitment and professional development of African American librarians. We want to celebrate and appreciate the many organizational partners and sponsors who have made this year's celebration possible. Thank you to our founding partner, the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection, and the New Haven Museum for co-hosting this year's celebration. The Peabody 26th annual celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s legacy of social and environmental justice is generously sponsored by citizens with additional support provided by the Office of the Secretary and Vice President for University Life and Belonging at Yale. Closed captioning is available for this program, and for any questions during the program, please use the Q&A feature. Our program today, titled Supporting Black Youth in Crisis, What Would Dr. King Say? What Would Dr. King Do? Will consist of a conversation between Connecticut clergy and community activists about a serious matter at this time. And at this time, I would like to introduce the panelists. First up, we have Robert W. Kinney, Sr., who is a Connecticut State Librarian, and he is an outreach librarian for the State Library. And he is also the senior pastor for Mount Hope Temple, located in New Haven. Second up would be Dr. Joseph H. Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the principal of the King Robinson Interdistrict Magnet School, located in New Haven, Connecticut. Next, we have Jordan Watson. Jordan is a gospel recording artist, and he's also the youth leader at Mount Hope Temple, which again is located in New Haven, Connecticut. Last but not least, we have Norman J. Newton Jr. Norman is the senior minister of the New Haven Church of Christ, located on Jim Street in New Haven, Connecticut. And Norman is also a New Haven community activist. I will now pass the mic to Robert Kinney, who not only will serve as the panelist, but also the moderator. Robert.
Thank you, Astoria. Thank you. And again, I want to welcome you all to our conversation that we are having today, supporting Black youth in crisis. What would Dr. Martin Luther King say, and what would he do? And I want to thank you all again for participating in this conversation that we're going to have, a real candid conversation dealing with some of the issues that are plaguing our communities, that are affecting our youth today. I'm going to start out by reading a part of Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech, which is quite familiar to a lot of people and very popular. Dr. King says in this speech, in this particular part, he says, "I have a dream that one day out of the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character, I chose that particular part of this of his speech because I find it amazing, because rumor has it is that when Dr. King made that speech, he went totally off script. That particular part of the I Have a Dream. Rumor has it that Mahalia Jackson, who was sitting behind him, nudged him and told him to tell them about the dream. So Martin was speaking from his heart about what he felt. Dr. King, I should say, was speaking from his heart about what was happening in the society and the issues that they were facing at that time. And so I'm going to start this conversation off with our panelists. In your opinion, as it relates to the state of our nation or our country today, has that dream been fulfilled, or do we have a ways to go? What do you all think?
Robert, I wouldn't mind chiming in.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't believe the dream has been fully fulfilled. We have made progress in the areas of racial equality, but we still have a ways to go. We made progress as a people, and we have obtained offices as high as the presidency of the United States. We have individuals in prominent positions in federal, local, and state government. But there are still major disparities racially, educationally, and economically that need to be addressed.
Yeah, I agree. I think that some of the things that Dr. King was trying to accomplish back then, we've reached a place that we've accomplished some of those things, but there's so much more to accomplish. Dr. Joe, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, we clearly do have a ways to go, but not because we're continuing to struggle with equality in a profusely detrimental way. Thanks to Dr. King, we do have legal equality. We do have a great deal of social equality. And no, it's not perfect by any of its dimensions. We still have many systemic issues, but we do have opportunities. I believe the final frontier is coming to that understanding and acceptance as Black and Brown and people of color. We have to make that final push to take advantage of his work. We have to push beyond our limits the way he did in order to actualize our dreams, his dream. We have to submit ourselves to something higher to ourselves, God, family, community, and our higher ideals. We have to hold ourselves and each other accountable to actualize his dream and to make the same types of sacrifices that made his sacrifice worth it. I truly believe that we all must take some sacrifice to some cause, to be a martyr to a cause, if you will. This is the challenge of human development. This is the challenge of adulthood. So we do have a ways to go in many respects, but that journey starts within us and starts with us. The pathway to social improvement is through self-improvement.
Yeah, that's so true. I believe that. One of the things that in this question, I realized that the world has changed so much from the time when Dr. King was advocating for civil rights. The world has changed so much to where we are now in some ways. So it's new challenges, but it's almost the same issues, somewhat, so what to speak. Jordan, what are your thoughts on that question?
I mean, completely agree as the last two fellows are my fellow panelists had stated in regards to we have a ways to go. And I love what Dr. said about for improvement, you first must self-improve. So we have to first self-change our mindset. We have to change our heart, change our way of thinking, and change how we view ourselves. I think a lot of it is we have mentally been stuck in the days of Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement. And because of that, if you're mentally stuck, how can you physically move? So we must first change ourselves mentally, and then we can physically move. And then you look at the progression. Yes, it's been great, but why is it just now, why are there so many just now first Blacks? That should have been happening. Why are there first Black presidents, first, I don't know, Black doctor? Why is that just the first? So we have a ways to go, but I appreciate where we've come from.
Yeah. And, I think that affects our youth a lot, because one of the questions that I think of to myself, where are our role models? Where are the role models for the youth in the community to look at? And besides athletes, we get our athletes, but where are other role models that stand out? So that's so true. How do you think the youth today are being judged by the color of their skin? And that's a direct quote taken out of Dr. King's speech. How do you think they're being judged? Are you?
Well, a few years ago, I would have said the exact same way it's always been, just marginalized and denigrated because of the color of their skin. And I do still believe that occurs in some ways. Yes, the media definitely has some growing to do in regards to the lights that they show us and showing us in different, more positive lights. But with working with young people, one thing I've come to realize in recent years is that they process race much differently than even my generation. I attended the Black Lives Matter rallies here in New Haven a couple of summers ago, and there were more white people there than there were blacks.
Yeah.
All youth of all colors seem to accept one another much more genuinely than I would have suspected a few years ago, or even how I was brought up. So yes, judgment is something that still occurs, but now this seems to me at this point in my life and career just part of the human experience in general. I'm not convinced at this moment that these judgments, as natural as they are, and as they pertain to race, are a determining factor in how our youth are being perceived and judged totally. I think it's more their actions that they're being judged by, as people should be judged by. And therefore, it's their actions that I think that they need to be more cognizant of and willing to adjust in order to be perceived in a more positive light.
Interesting point. Yeah. What are your thoughts, Pastor Newton?
We all have a part to play when it comes to a person's personal perception of who we are, and we need to be accountable for that. But I still believe some of our Black and brown children have been marginalized simply because the color of their skin. There are many characterizations. If a child is wearing a hoodie or do-rag or his pants are sagging, a lot of times there are negative characteristics that are associated with them as a result of those things. Do I believe they need to pull their pants up? Certainly. Unfortunately, there are still some in society that view our Blackness as a weapon. And we need to do what we can to change that narrative. Also, as Dr. Joe mentioned and Jordan mentioned, it has a lot to do with our own personal accountability. But there are sometimes individuals, without even getting to know who you are, they've made a judgment based on the color of your skin. I do believe racial inequities still exist, and we associate them. We use modern terms as walking while Black, driving while Black, shopping while Black. And there have been some negative things that have happened as a result of race being, one of the prominent things. We need to be able to have open conversations such as this. As Dr. King mentioned in his speech, we ought to be known by the content of our character as a result, as opposed to the color of our skin. We still have a ways to go.
Yeah. I'm reminding of some conversations that I've had with some of our younger youth, and when it came about the topic of their skin or who they were, it was almost like a negative tone, because I'm Black. And I'm like, where's that coming from? And why are we still dealing with that issue today? We have some work to do. We have some work to do. Jordan, coming from a youth perspective, what are your thoughts on that?
Absolutely. Again, just echoing what the doctor has said and the Reverend has said, there is a ways to go. And I do believe, unfortunately, that we are just judged by the color of our skin. And that youth are, and they feel like they're judged by the color of their skin, whether it's in a classroom setting, whether it's they're going for a job, whether they're going shopping at the mall, going to the movies, whatever it may be. If you have a white male, a Black male youth, why are you preferring the white male over me? Or why does the Black male feel like he has to prove himself even more? We have the same education. We come from the same community. Why do I feel because of the color of my skin, I have to prove myself even more? So,
yeah. I've had to be careful about that too, because sometimes, as you brought the situation about being in a line and being overlooked, the first thing I want to go to is because of the color of my skin. It's because of the way I look, but I have to be careful because I don't want to go there. And I want to give better judgment and give the person the benefit of the doubt. So it's a tough environment to try to navigate through. And
it is. I'm sorry to cut you off there. It is, and a lot of it is just self-implied. It's when you look on the TVs, when you look at hit shows, the black characters are always the ones who have a negative storyline, or you look at that and you're like, is that me? Because sometimes we don't, like you said, we don't have those role models. So we look to TV, we look to the media, and these are our role models here. And it's just like, I guess that is who I'm supposed to be. And so I imply that on myself as well.
Right. So seeing the state of our youth today, the condition of our communities and the state of the world, the million-dollar question, if Dr. King were alive today, what would he say? This requires a little imagination. What do you think? How do you think Dr. King would view what's happening in the world today?
Yeah, this was definitely a tough one. You know, I can't speak for Dr. King, as he was deceased long before I was even born. I think there's also evidence that even he was evolving in his understanding of his work and the world even prior to his death. What I would hope he would say or do is to continue to be a voice of responsibility, maturity, and reason for our communities. What I would hope to hear is his willingness to hold everyone accountable outside our community and within for their roles in the conditions of our communities or the way we're being perceived. I just think that, or hope that he would continue to be courageous, a courageous voice of change that he was known for until his death, whether those viewpoints were politically or socially acceptable or not. And, you know, definitely for everyone who can hear my voice, I think my general message is that, you know, I totally acknowledge and accept that there are many systemic issues that we continue to struggle with. However, I'm at a stage of life and career in life, I should say. I'm a pretty brand new father. I have a 6-year-old and 3-year-old boys. Excuse me. And so, you know, I'm just at a stage of career in life that as much as I think we should definitely address systemic issues, I think the other side of that spectrum is conversations about personal accountability. Yeah. And I think that we can't part and parcel those two conversations anymore. We have to address all dimensions of the spectrum in order if we really want to see changes in our conditions and changes in the way we're perceived.
Yeah, I agree. Pastor Newton?
If Dr. King was alive today, what would he say? I believe as a people, he would say we need to do a better job of looking out for one another, encouraging one another. We have to remember that we are our brother's keeper and we are our sister's keeper. We have to have a greater level of accountability among Black and brown people in this nation. We need to take advantage of, I believe he would say we need to take advantage of the voting and educational opportunities that have been made at our disposal, because many of our predecessors have fought and died for these rights that many times we don't take advantage of. There are disparities within our system, but we should not respond with hate, but we should persevere with love. That's not something that Dr. King just pounded from a pulpit, but that's what he lived out throughout the course of his life with his nonviolent approach. I believe he would also say, as we look at ourselves, especially those within the African-American community, he mentioned in a quote before, I want to suggest some of the things that should begin your life's blueprint. Number one, you should have a deep belief in your own dignity, your own worth, and your somebodiness. Always feel that you count, always feel that you have worth, and always feel that your life has ultimate significance. That should be a norm that we speak into the lives of our brothers and sisters as we see them. As we see them going in the wrong direction, we ought to be able to say, to course correct, hey, brother, you may be going in the wrong direction. I'm here to encourage you, or you're better than what I see you doing. And a lot of times we may see individuals going in the wrong direction and, say, hey, that's their life. And we just go about our direction. The movement was so powerful in the 50s and 60s because we had men and women who were willing to stand, and they had a more communal mind about our people. And a lot of that has been lost. And I think that has to do with the disintegration of the family. Everything starts at home. I know we want to talk about changes that need to occur in the White House, But before changes occur in the White House, we need to start in our own house.
Yeah, that's so true. I agree. And one thing that stood out was that it was important. Dr. King had the urgency to organize the communities. And as you said, people were willing to stand up in the community. It wasn't just something that just started. It started on the ground level in terms of the movement, in homes and in churches. And so, and somewhere we've lost that. I agree. Jordan, what's your take on that?
Just to add to the great points that have already been said, I think a strong perspective of Dr. King was make sure you have a relationship with Jesus Christ. Make sure you pray daily. Make sure you meditate daily. Make sure you are operating in love. Make sure you are being courteous. Make sure you are showing peace. Make sure your actions are being seen to be good and not of evil. I think that is something he would keep on preaching and demonstrating and be an example of if he were alive today in today's community. But everything else they said, absolutely.
Yeah, I agree.
And Pastor Kenny, I want to just follow up on something, a point that Pastor Newton made that's so real about, how much courage it really takes in order to hold, our brothers and sisters accountable. It's really tough work. It's easier said than done. And, I want to take a second to acknowledge that, because sometimes these folks that you have to hold accountable are people you love. People you grew up with, and it's hard. Not my words, but his. I just caught an interview from the rapper Meek Mill the other day, and he talked about how, his words, not mine, how the hood will laugh at you when you're trying to, better yourself, when you're trying to make something of yourself. And so, and that's quite hurtful, I'm sure, when you're rejected by your own. And so, it's a tough task. It's a tall task. To really, speak up about what you feel or know is right in your heart and your head. And I think it's important, as he mentioned, to start in our homes, to imbue our children with the courage to stand up for themselves and for their communities. And it's going to be really, really tough work. And it may get you rejected among your peer circle, among people that you respect and love. But it's something that's just got to happen at this stage of our lives and our development.
Yeah. Good point. Very good point.
And I think just to even add to that, yes, you may get laughed at. Like if you say, I want to go this career path, or I want to go to this school. But I think even as you mentioned in the beginning, Pastor Kenny, in regards to the quote that you said, and how the rumor is that Mahalia Jackson was like, tell the dream. So I think Dr. King would even add, keep dreaming. Yeah. And share your dream with some good people so they can keep on pushing you, and you can share that dream with others. Yeah. And then it just becomes infectious in that sense as well.
Yeah. Very good points. I'm going to move on to the next question. I'm going to start it off with Pastor Newton because it deals with the church. Dr. King said in one of his speeches delivered at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia on June 5th, 1966, he said that, I'm quoting him, he said, "It seems that I can hear God of the universe smiling and speaking to this church saying, 'You are a great church. Glory to God, because I was hungry and you fed me. You are a great church because I was naked and you clothed me. You are a great church because I was sick and you visited me. You are a great church because I was in prison and you gave me consolation by visiting me.' Yes, sir. And this is the church that's going to save the world." So starting with Pastor Newton, the question I want to ask is, what do you think the role of the church should be today to help support our youth? Dr. King talked about all those things which are mentioned in the Bible in terms of feeding and clothing. How is the church of Jesus Christ today? What's the role of the church today with our young people?
I think Dr. King makes a reference to Matthew 25 in reference to levels of outreach. I believe that the church should be a major catalyst and support for our youth in the areas of education, spiritual development, life skills training, and even mentoring. The church should be a safe place or safe haven and a source of encouragement for our youth. At our church, I know we're trying to make progressive steps. We are making concerted efforts with our youth program as well as young adults. I say it often at our congregation, our church has to leave the four walls in order to be effective in the community. Ministry in and of itself, by definition, is service, and we are called to serve. And as these three gentlemen mentioned, spiritual development is extremely important. How we see ourselves. We have been created in the image of God. We have been fearfully and wonderfully made. We need to understand these sentiments as opposed to taking the narrative about somebody else that may project to us who may not know us, or who may not have our best interests at heart. The church can also help with the areas of relationship building. All of our homes are not stable. I think somebody mentioned previously, we're lacking role models. I grew up in a project area, and there weren't a whole lot of positive role models at that particular time. And we need to be able to project better. We need to have more positive influencers that our young people are able to see. We have to be willing to step outside of ourselves in order to actually make an effective change. I think, one of the ways that we can keep the dream alive is by taking personal accountability and saying that, look, I'm going to be an asset to make my community better. You can't wait on the government to do that. That's not the government's job. I have some, that think that, hey, changes governmentally is going to structurally change everything. You have to aid, we as a people have to aid in our own rescue. We need to make personal declarations that I will do what I can to improve our community by being more engaged and active participant in helping my community become a better place. Yes, we still have to hold our public officials accountable, but we have to do our part. We need to begin with saying, I won't just complain about the issues of injustice, but I will do what I can to contribute to the change. This may include volunteering for causes, signing petitions, peaceful protests, modeling, assisting at the school, volunteering. If we want change to take place, we can no longer afford to sit on the sidelines, but we must get involved. That's a part of the effort of the church. It's not only laden on the church, but if we want our people as a community to do better, not just Black and brown, but we ought to want overall benefit and blessing for the entire community. We all have to do our part.
Yeah. Y'all have anything you want to comment on that question? Dr. Johnson, Jordan?
Yeah, geez, Pastor Newton. You summed it all up. When I read that quote, it literally came to mind, this might be a crazy quote, but it says, show me what you're working with. Don't just talk about it, be about it. Sure. So the church should be a place for youth where they can learn to be financially stable, spiritually stable, mentally stable. They should see different careers in the church. Their gifts and their talents should be developed in the church. I remember when I was in church, I'm originally from Middletown, Connecticut. We had a basketball league in the church.
Yeah,
we would play basketball against other churches, and that just grew. We would volunteer at the soup kitchen. So different extracurricular activities the church should also provide as well.
Wow.
I am a God-fearing man, but I'll defer to the expertise of Pastor Newton and Mr. Watson. They clearly are more involved and engaged and know what they're talking about. The only thing I would just add is that how important it is especially from someone who sits in my wheelhouse for more alliances with Black clergy. Here at King Robinson, I've had the opportunity to work with many great pastors like you, Pastor Kenny, Pastor John Cotton, Pastor Robert Smith, and those relationships and those alliances are strong and beneficial to the schools and the community.
Yeah, I totally agree. One thing that I always like to emphasize when we talk about the civil rights movements in the 50s and 60s, it started in the church. And with that, it started in the basement of churches and sometimes in the homes of believers. And that's where the movement started. And, that was the source of power for Dr. Martin Luther King to continue through his journey. And so it started in the church. Dr. King said in a published article, he said, "It seems to me that education has a twofold function to perform in the life of man in society. The one is utility and the other is culture. Education must enable a man to become more efficient, to achieve with increasing facility the legitimate goals of his life." Dr. Joseph, I read in an article that Black students receive harsher punishment than white students in educational settings, indicating that racism is embedded in our school systems. And for students of color who receive greater disciplinary actions than their white counterparts, the effects are much more than just getting in trouble at school. The negative stereotypes and racial stigmatizations that students of color face daily perpetuate the decreased motivation to learn and oftentimes leads to higher dropout rates among Black students. As an educator in the New Haven public school systems, what troubling patterns are you seeing in the lower grade levels? And do you agree with that article that stated that Black students receive harsher punishment than white students in educational settings, indicating that racism is embedded in our school systems?
So again, in all my answers, I want to try to address both sides of the spectrum, the systemic change that's needed, but also the personal accountability that has to be addressed. And so I agree to an extent. As we see the push for critical race theory throughout the country, I do understand the importance and spirit of that work in order to push social advancement and change, and particularly in the schools. But admittedly, I'm still not convinced that that work should begin within the schools. As educators, we have entirely too many other priorities in regards to educating children and caring for their welfare. And so, I don't want to take up too much time on a soapbox about that particular issue. Don't get me wrong, cultural competence matters, all right? And we should push for greater understandings of each other and our students whenever we can. But those pushes should be productive and not counterproductive, which, as we see in the critical race theory debate, is manifesting. So I understand that minority children need more allies in particularly predominantly white schools and districts where these incidents of harsher punishment do occur. However, I want to answer the question from my personal perspective. And I am a Black educator for over 20 years. I am a former special education teacher who has served in minority communities for the entirety of my career, and not only here in New Haven, but in Washington, D.C. And I'm also married to a high school principal here in New Haven. My wife is the principal of Wilbur Cross High School. I myself, my wife, and educators of our ilk, we judge students fairly and hold them accountable for their actions. And we do not call the police on them. I have never, in fact, I've never called the police on a child ever in my career. In fact, to be frank, and I do take exception with terms like school to prison pipeline. In my professional experience, that there's a home to prison pipeline. It is important that in this stage of our history in our schools, for parents to take more responsibility for their children's behavior and their willingness to take responsibility for their actions. The best way I can describe it, Pastor Kenny, is not just myself and the way I was raised, but also how my wife was raised, is that schools primarily should educate, and parents should have the disciplinary issues squared away. And if, and again, they're children and we all have to grow and develop and make mistakes. And so, ultimately we'll have to deal with some situations, but ultimately, again, parents are the primary educator in regards to social decorum and how to conduct yourself when out and about. My parents always told me that, I wasn't just representing myself, but I was representing them, and representing their family, representing the family. And so it was my responsibility to understand that and uphold that when I'm in school and also out in the community. So, I do understand that in predominantly white districts that this does occur. And unfortunately, our kids are, their behavior is perceived and much harsher or much more detrimental than some of their white counterparts. But we got to do a better job, at least in the communities and in the schools that I served in making sure students are prepared to take accountability for their own actions.
Yeah. Brother Jordan, would you like to chime in on that?
I think he summed it up pretty well, but just to reiterate, as he said, your upbringing and your parents and your support system is such a major part in education. Not only how to act in school, but even just how you retain and even how the education should happen before and should happen after a school day as well. And just with the mindset of you don't just represent yourself. Yes, I represent my mom, I represent my dad, my grandparents, my family name. I represent some education in classrooms. I represented the whole Black community. I was the only Black guy in the class. So every way I reacted, oh, that's how all Black people act, or that's how all Black males act. So just with the mindset of it's not about you. It's a bigger dream, and you're part of a bigger community.
Yeah. How about you, Pastor Newton? What do you think?
I think it goes back to, it all starts at the home. The home is paramount. We have a partnership with Lincoln Bassett. We have some volunteers that are going over and assist, and we're looking to establish different partnership with different schools with different levels of volunteerism. And we have a lot of our children. There are a lot of dysfunction at home, and a lot of times that shows up in the classroom. And unfortunately, our teachers are not always able to do what they need to do, because rather than educate, they have to discipline. And that's something as a community we all have to become, accountable in that area to grow. And we need to support our educators in a greater way. We all have to do a better pull. We've been talking about with some of our leaders, even our church, we may have to do some parenting classes. We all can do some refreshers and supports. There's so many different nuances to technology and understanding these dynamics, and not just giving your child a phone and just allowing them to go in the room and close the door. With social media and everything else, they have the ability to be able to go anywhere. So we need to be able to find different ways to be able to engage and point them in positive directions. So that's more involvement. And I'm a parent of 4. I have 3 young adult children and a 13-year-old who think he's 21. So parenting is tough. We need all the prayers we can get, but we also need support as well.
Yeah.
And circling back to the through line or the theme of just how difficult these conversations are. They are very different difficult for educators of all colors. My white colleagues, Black colleagues, Hispanic colleagues. These are really tough conversations to have with parents without many taking the natural, having the natural reaction as that it's some affront to their parenting. It's really, really tough. And none of us, as I just learned in the past 6 years, children don't come with a manual. And so it is tough work. And I think we recognize that. And so here's where the cultural competence definitely matters in regards to building trust with parents and getting them to understand that, when we have those difficult conversations, it's not an affront to you or you personally or your parenting. It's about, as I say to my parents, you push, I pull, we get them to where they need to be. And we put them in their proper position. But, to be frank, Pastor Kenny, those conversations take a lot of time and investment and goodwill with parents. And, unfortunately, not all educators have that patience or have that perspective. So, it takes us all. But, one thing I'll say, even solely from the educational field, we have, 50 plus years of research that really highlights the importance of parental involvement. I mean, we cannot do it without involved and engaged parents and without positive relationships with parents. So, it's definitely something that has to happen if we're going to see improvement in our school systems.
Yeah. I can remember growing up in high school, just seeing so many kids being labeled, and so many of our kids being labeled as being learning disabled or whatever the case may have been. But what it did was it stunted their potential And I knew just by having conversations, some of these kids were smart. Some of these kids were almost, I wouldn't say brilliant, but they were smart. But as you said, I don't know what was happening in the home. I don't know what was happening at home to help push them and to help challenge them, and as I believe Pastor Newton, you said, as to speak over their lives, to let them know that they are smart and that they do have purpose. But I saw that so much growing up, kids being labeled, and I believe in so many ways it snuffed out their potential.
I think, I'm sorry, Pastor Kenny.
No,
I think Dr. Johnson said like a huge word, and that is there trust? Do the parents trust that during these difficult conversations, they're going to be heard and there are not going to be repercussions because of these difficult conversations? And when that trust is built, can the educational system support the resources that family may need?
Yeah,
that's the back part. So is there a before and after school program if the parent has to go to work early or late? Is there a therapist? Is there a counselor, not just a guidance counselor who helps you apply to college? That's how it was when I went to school. But like, is it more in depth? Like, what resources can the educational system really supply? And because with teachers, it's like they're not only educating, they're becoming therapists, they're becoming godparents, they're becoming, you know what I mean? So much more than just educating or educators.
Yeah.
So that's also the other side of it. After that trust, can the education system support what resources are needed?
Okay. Yeah, those are excellent responses. We're pushing towards the end of our conversation, and we have tons and tons of questions. And I apologize if we don't get to them all, but there are people that are asking questions, and I do want to give a little time for us to respond to some of the questions. I have one question here, and the question is, what does personal accountability look like in terms of voting rights? What needs to happen to ensure that once the person of color votes, the vote is not diluted through gerrymandering or the vote is counted? I have grave concern that the lack of protecting voting through legislator will not happen. In addition, the Supreme Court is now so politicized that, as we saw with Shelby versus Holder civil rights legislator, can be overturned. I remain hopeful, but hope is not a strategy. I would like to hear from each of you regarding my comments. So what do you think about our voting rights? Of course, voting, that's one of the topics of today that's being challenged. And the question is, what does personal accountability look like in terms of voting, our voting rights?
Well, I think that, the personal accountability starts with just participating, actually voting.
Yeah.
A lot of what our political system has become has transpired because we as the people have allowed it to. We've allowed these people to come into office, to make these drastic changes and to have these negative and adverse impacts on our system. I think people would be shocked, even when you look at the last few mayoral races in New Haven. I think people would really be shocked about how little votes you really need to obtain a political position at this point. There isn't a lot of turnout. And so participation is integral in order to push back on these very real things that are happening in regards to marginalizing the voting rights of Black and Brown people in particular.
Yeah.
I think it's important, as Dr. Johnson said, on the initial level, we just got to vote. But prior to voting, we have to educate ourselves about the candidates. And a lot of times we may vote on the national level in reference to the presidency, but we don't really care much about the state and local level. That also has a great impact. I was talking to the registrar of voting, and many of our districts in the New Hallville area, we don't turn out to vote. And we, along with a couple of other agencies, Mr. Kenny, I think New Hallville United, we put out an effort to trying to get individuals to vote. We were putting out signs, trying to do what we can to drum up support for votes. But sometimes our people are not interested. I will and there's so much prompting. We have to do a better job. Systemically, it's easy to complain about, the laws that come down, but we have to realize that we play a part in the process. If we want our laws to be better or more fair or equitable, we have to become engaged in the process. That's the best way to be able to bring about change. You can do that with a vote or engage yourself in the process. If none of the candidates or fit the bill, throw your name in the hat and see what you can get done. And initially, we just have to be able to get involved, educate ourselves about the process, vote on city, local, state, and federal level as we proceed.
All right, I'm going to move kind of quickly through these questions so that we can get as many in as possible. This question is directed at Jordan. You had mentioned at times being the only Black student in the classroom and feeling the weight or influence of being the only Black representation that others use as an example. As a young Black woman that has experienced this as well, how do we move without that pressure? I've never heard my white counterparts express the same challenges.
Wow. I wish I had that answer. No, but seriously, I think it's going to go back to how you view and value yourself. Do you feel like you belong there? Yes. You know what I mean? So if it's each day before walking into the classroom, you have a saying, I belong here, I'm educated, I'm smart, whatever it may be, just reiterating that on a daily basis has helped me, even at work, with sometimes being the only Black male there as well. I don't have anything else to add. I'm not sure if my other panelists do. That's loaded. That's loaded.
Well, as you brothers know, the more we even ascend in our own personal and professional lives, often we are the only people in the room. And so, what I'd say to the commenter is that I understand, that inherently and maybe systemically is not fair. It's a lot of pressure. What I challenge you with is to take on the challenge, however, to develop your strength of character. And because ultimately, as we've mentioned many times in this forum, is that it starts with each individual. And we are still very much in a space where we all can make a contribution to help each other. And you standing up and standing firm in situations like that could be the difference about how those folks perceive anybody and everybody that comes after you. So again, I'll acknowledge that it isn't fair in every situation. I definitely have been the only Black man in a lot of spaces, but ultimately, I have pushed myself to step up to that challenge because I know it's not only important to me in that situation, but it's important to anybody else who comes after me.
Yeah.
I think it's extremely important, just to add to some of the sentiments that were made. I want to encourage this young lady to, we would not as a people have had the level of progression we have had if there were not people blazing the trail before us. And I've been in the same situation, high school, even in collegiate courses. It's important for us, to be able to make those new segments. As individuals mentioned previously, we need more first. And, that I don't think that pressure goes away. I think it was Frederick Douglass who said, without struggle, there is no progress. And as a result of you standing, hopefully sometimes that can help center you on, hey, if others are able to see you're the only one, that may give them the encouragement to know that maybe they can do it as well. So just know you're not isolated with that situation. Others have gone through it and have progressed. And we know that you will continue to do that as well. God bless.
Yeah. I just say this real quick. I had a conversation with my uncle. I'm originally from Charlottesville, Virginia, and he was the first to integrate Albemarle County High School in Virginia. And I had a conversation with him, and he said he remembers the thing that stands out was being lonely because no one talked to him. No one would speak to you. And we encounter that same experience sometimes when we're in rooms where it's just us, and we have that same feeling because sometimes it is a lonely feeling of being lonely and not being talked or spoken to. But yeah, I would.
And then
Go ahead.
And then even beyond that, like, are you creating that scenario? You know, sometimes we can be like, oh, I'm the only Black one, so I don't have anything in common with anyone else in the room. So are you self-inflicting that? Therefore, you're like harboring yourself. Therefore, you're not really being your true self and really not shining as you should be shining within that environment. So sometimes, again, it's just that self-infliction, that mindset. Change that mindset.
Yeah.
I'm making this. And so, but then on the flip side, I'm sorry, it may be that scenario. So even in that scenario, still push through, be your best, and like you said, blaze that trail. But
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. One person asked the question, how do panelists think the schools can be reorganized so school staff and families have more opportunities to make positive connections to support or in support of our youth?
Well, I know we don't have a lot of time left, so I'll just touch it real quick. I think that, I know that school reform has been on the table for our nation since the Reagan era. We've been trying to reconceive what that is. There's a lot of politics and economics that's loaded into that question. And life as we know it, to a great degree, would have to probably change. And to some degree, that situation has come with COVID. So a lot of what we see in regards to distance learning and the way that boards function and the way that districts function, COVID has initiated by force some rethinking of and retooling of how we educate. Again, that's a whole nother panel unto itself. But you know, it's a very, very tall task, again, that is connected to a lot of politics and economics.
Okay, I don't know if Jesse can hear me. I think we are probably close to being out of time. There's a lot of questions, but I think we can respond to a lot of the questions offline and so on. Jesse, are you there? Can you hear me?
Pastor Kenny, I just would invite, and I'm sure my other panelists would agree that, you know, anyone who didn't get a question answered, who would like some follow-up, please reach out to me here at King Robinson here in New Haven. I am very accessible through the web, through the district website, and we do have our own website. And so please, call the school, email me. My email is accessible again on the website, and I'll be more than happy to have some follow-up or some direct connection. Obviously, as running a school, we need as many partners as possible. So whether it be for your personal enrichment or you're interested in partnering, please reach out, as I'm always open and willing to partner with people.
Wonderful.
Great, wonderful.
I just add to that as well. Anybody who has additional questions, want to engage further, my email is norman, norman.nuton@gmail.com. You can check us out. We have a footprint on Facebook, YouTube. Just type in New Haven Church of Christ, and also our website, www.newhavencoc.com. And we look forward to engage. And Dr. Joe, I'll be reaching out to you to see how we can partner with King Robinson as well. And Jordan, I know you got a bright future in front of you, and I'm glad I'm gonna take a picture just to say I met a person who was famous as well.
Appreciate you.
Thank you again for the opportunity. Just fortunate to be able to be on such a program with such astute brothers, and I'm just encouraged and inspired to do better. And Godspeed to all of you.
Yeah, I think, you all have been wonderful. And this has been a really, really awesome conversation. We just needed more time, but we got enough questions in, and there's so many questions that people have asked. But I think there may be a way to address some of the questions offline. And as you've given your own personal contact information, people can also contact you there as well, and can contact me or Jordan as well if you have any questions that you would like to ask. So again, I want to thank you all for joining this conversation. Do something good in the name of service in the memory of Dr. King. And this has been an awesome conversation, and I will turn it over back to Jesse, I believe, at this time.
It's Astoria, Robert.
Well, Astoria, I'm sorry.
Okay. This was a fantastic program. I don't know what to tell you guys. I really thank you all. It was just great, wonderful. It got the conversation going, and I'm hoping it will continue. I'd like to thank you, the incredible speakers. I'd like to thank you all. You were really great. And thank everyone who attended today. We hope you will follow the Peabody on social media and visit the Peabody's MLK event website to find out about other upcoming programs throughout the holiday weekend, which is it's about to come to an end. If you'd like to learn more about the Bacala affiliate, please visit bcalact.org or the national organization bcala.org. Thank you very much for attending. That's the end of our program. Thank you.